YA nerds. So today we are going to talk about a completely different book, a different kind of book. Uh, it is nonfiction, which I don't usually do. I think I've done one before this. But I think this kind of book is really important right now. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and this book kind of talks a little bit about mental health and how to, it's kind of a self-help book, but not really. I don't know how else to describe it, so I guess I'll just show it to you. So this is Hello Cruel World, 101 Alternatives to Suicide for Teens, Freaks, and Other Outlaws by Kaye Bornstein, with a foreword by Sarah Quinn and Tegan and Sarah. Oh, of Tegan and Sarah, sorry. So a little bit about this book. It was published May 2nd in 2006, so 14 years ago. I know it's crazy. This book could be a teenager now. And it is 234 pages. It hasn't won any awards, but like, look how beautiful this cover is. Isn't that crazy looking? This is what caught my attention about this book, like many books. And we've talked a little bit about it before, how like book covers are made to like capture the attention of the audience who's interested in the book. And that's kind of how a lot of books get sold, just based on like the pop factor that the cover has. So small backstory. I was in Seattle 3 or 4 years ago. 4 years ago, I guess. And I was in a bookstore with one of my really good friends. I think it was called the East Bay Bookstore in Seattle. And I saw this book. And now, I'm not a teenager. I'm not really a freak. I am kind of an outlaw, based on Kaye Bornstein's definition. But other than that, like, this book shouldn't be for me, technically. But I picked it up and bought it anyway. My philosophy in life is if you go into a bookstore, especially an indie-owned bookstore, you have to buy a book. You can't walk out of that store without buying a book. So every bookstore we went into in Seattle, I bought a book, and I ended up coming home with like 6 books in my suitcase, which was real smart. But this was one of them. So we're going to talk about this today. As for the plot of this book, there really isn't one. Because it's a nonfiction book, some of them don't really focus on plots unless you're reading like a biographical book or a history book. There's not really like a plot to speak of. I kind of mentioned that this was a self-help book. Like the cover suggests, it's 101 Alternatives to Suicide. So it is literally a list of things to do instead of hurting yourself, which right now during a pandemic, during a quarantine, probably not a bad idea to pick up a book like this. It's just a lot of like distraction tools. The thing I love about this book, probably more than anything, is the introduction written by Kate. She is a very loving, nurturing soul of a person, and you can just feel that in the introduction. She speaks to you on like a person-to-person level. I really kind of read just the introduction, and then I skipped around to a bunch of the different suggestions. So for like the plot, that's really all I would really say, is it's this beautiful introduction by a human being who tells you that she loves you, that she cares about you, even though she doesn't know you, and you believe her because she just comes across very genuine in the book. So just a couple of the tips that she gives. Sing for your supper. So go somewhere and sing and then get food. Dance for your life. And the other cool thing I like about this book is she gives you a short list. I'm trying to find it. I know I'm so unprepared every time I do these things. She gives you a short list of the alternatives. And she gives you an explanation for them too. So she gives you like how safe they are. There you go. How effective the tip is. And is it legal, not legal, or moral? And so she kind of gives you like all these like keywords, and then the list starts. And it's long. And then what you could do is like, let's say you don't want to read the whole book, because this isn't a book that you read in one sitting. This is a book that you pick up when you're desperate for something. You pick it up, And you look at your index of alternatives and you decide based on how safe it is, how effective it is, how difficult it is, what you want to do. And then you flip to the page where it's at. And I think this is designed really well. So like the first one is keep moving. The difficulty is, the safety is 3 out of 4 hearts. So really safe. And the effectiveness is 4 out of 4 umbrellas. And the rating, let me see, what does G mean? The rating is general, so it's anyone can do it, even your grandma. That's what the general means. So keep moving. Do you ever get stir crazy, like you can't stand being where you are any longer? Hi, we're in quarantine. Do you know how good it feels to finally get out of there? Less and less movement is a sign of less and less life. Dead things don't move at all. Any kind of motion means there's some life. Learning how to move well will help you learn how to live better. So just get up and move. And then there are other like crazy things. Make art out of it. Save the whales, the children, or the world. Give yourself permission to do something. Play a game you like to play. Act your age or any other age. So that's the plot for this, I would say, if we're going to call it a plot. That's the purpose of this book. Because this book's nonfiction, there's not really tropes to talk about. The only tropes it applies to are youths in danger, beautiful first line, and love cures all. But they're not the tropes like we usually talk about. So like youths in danger is usually like the main characters of the story are children or teenagers and they're in danger the entire story and they have to like fight their way out of it. This is more like teenagers who pick up this book could be at a risk of suicide or other mental health adjacent issues, you know, depression, anxiety, etc. And so those youths are in danger and they're helping themselves out by using the book as a tool. Beautiful first lines. Again, the introduction by Kate is gorgeous. I teared up a little bit reading it, and I'm not even the demographic for this book. And love cures all. That's kind of Kate Bornstein's mantra. Like, she loves you and she wants you to live. So it's that's the only way I can apply tropes to a nonfiction book like this. And those work, but again, the tropes are really made for like fictional books, and so that's the only 3 I can really give it. Like I say every video, for the definitions of the tropes, you just scroll down to the description down below, and I'll put them there. Again, there's only 3, and I did kind of describe them to you just now, so take the definitions I put down below with a grain of salt, because again, this is a nonfiction book, and you can't really apply tropes to it. And the tropes that I've gathered really don't apply to nonfiction books because I don't read a lot of them. But they are applied to a lot of fiction books. There's 38 of them that I've made up myself or gathered from other sources like librarians and teenagers and blogs and the internet in general. So that's it for the tropes. So for read-alikes, again, I use 2 different websites to do. We use Goodreads, which is owned by Amazon, and Novelist, which is hosted by EBSCO, and run by a group of, I'm assuming, librarians, because usually their recommendations are spot on. And really, those are the big 2 differences. A lot of the recommendations on Goodreads, I'm assuming, are user-generated or keyword-generated. So if a book follows a series of keywords, they're recommended together. Whereas with Novelist, it's usually run on a bunch of different factors. And so you kind of get like a more accurate recommendation from Novelist. Anyway. So Goodreads recommended to me The Last Time I Wore a Dress by Daphne Shalinsky. Ooh, almost messed that up. So that's a memoir about a young trans woman growing up. Could be very similar to this or not. And the other one was Rock Steady, Brilliant Advice from My Bipolar Life by Ellen Forney. So another advice book from somebody who suffers from, well, I shouldn't say suffers, from someone who lives with mental illness, bipolar disorder, and giving advice based off of that. And then Novelist gave us Stuff That Sucks by Ben Sedley. So I think it's another one of those, like, life sucks and here's a bunch of things that suck and how you can get over it. and Freaking Out, Real Life Stories About Anxiety, which is compiled by Polly Wells. And that is a series of stories. I'm pretty sure they're true stories, written by a bunch of different people. I think there's 13 in there. I could be wrong. No, there's probably more than that. I think I'm confusing it with another book. But they're all compiled together into one volume, and you can read them all like that. So I'm constantly changing the channel, and I really should stop. I'm going to try to review the books towards the end when I do the rating, because it makes more sense for me to say I'm giving this book a blank out of 10 and here's why. So for this book, I'm giving it a 10 out of 10 and here's why. I actually wrote out a whole thing. I don't want to read it like a script because I'm looking at all of you and I can't keep looking at you and then looking at my script and looking back at you. So I kind of already hinted at why this book's getting such a high rating. It's a really important book, I think, to have on your bookshelf, whether you are a teenager or not. The recommendations in the book are pretty spot on. I've followed some of them just for funsies, just to do something. And now that we're all kind of going through this very traumatic event together, it would probably be a good reason or good time to get a book like this so that you have something to distract you or to help you focus or deal with everything. And a lot of people right now are going through this in different varying ways, you know, whether they are still seeing a therapist or not, whether they have health insurance even for that or for anything, or even if they have money to do any of these things. It's a really hard time for everybody. So that's kind of why I wanted to talk about this book, because I feel like it could help. I hope. Again, I am not suicidal. I picked it up on a whim. The cover, again, caught my attention. Why not? And I feel like this is one of those books that everyone should have on their bookshelf, because we shouldn't stigmatize against this. If you're feeling suicidal, you should do something about it. That's not killing yourself, because the world would be worse off without you. And I know that's hard for a lot of people to understand, but it's true. And that's the message that Kate gives us. That's the message she wants us to hear. She wants us to know she's there for us. And you can find her on Twitter. I highly recommend following her. I follow her on Twitter. Hi, Kate. But she's a very interesting individual. And I think hearing her story, reading her story, because she does delve into her history here, and even following her on Twitter or any other social media that you happen to follow her on, is a very smart thing to do right now. I could be biased because I do love her to death. But I think hearing someone else tell you that they love you might be what you need today. Or maybe it's not. Maybe you need to do something else. Maybe you need to come out wherever you are. Or say please and thank you. Or go shopping. Well, don't go shopping right now, but she has suggestions for everything. Give up nouns for a day. Why not? What could it hurt? So that's all I really have to say about this book, 101 Alternatives to Suicide. Hello Cruel World is really the beginning of the title. And go pick it up. Read it. Even if you have to read it digitally right now because you can't go to the store. And I guess that's it for this week. And I hope you guys are taking care of yourselves. So, peace out, YA nerds.